dual role today that I am the host and the moderator also. Normally, I am just the host. I play a background role. So I am the host and moderator because unfortunately, Dr. Sanjay Asrani was supposed to be the moderator today. His close relative was pretty ill, so that's why he could not join. Though he was there for the trial session yesterday, he could not join today. And that is the reason why I'll have to do this double role, and that happened just before we were leaving. So let's hope that everything turns out okay for Sanjay. We are going to miss him. I have Vipin with me. Vipin, as you all know, is a person who's been active uh, in so many things. He's a very active person as far as implants and maxillofacial surgery is concerned, and he is also. I went to see his clinic, which he's kept open during the Corona times while we were slightly frightened. So he has got a lot of things that he's done for his clinic. I will just introduce Dr. Vipin. Vipin has done his PG from Pravara Institute of Medical Sciences in OMFS. He is a fellow of the Nobel Biocare Implant. He is a fellow of Ostem Implant, fellow of Cleft and Craniofacial Surgery. He's a fellow of the RST Cancer Center. So his fields, as you can see, are very diverse. So he's the ex-consultant at RST, and he is in a very premier hospital in Nagpur, that is the Kingsway Hospital. He's got his own unit that is the Appleton Care Center, the national coordinator for Indian Society of Oral Implantologists, and he had a very important designation in the uh, Nagpur ISOI, which may be rescheduled because of uncertain times. I'm not going to waste more time. Vipin?
Hi, sir.
Yeah, Vipin. Now the field is yours. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir.
So just before you start once again, if there are any questions, you can put them in the chat box.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to start my presentations. Topic of my presentation is overcoming pitfalls in dental implantology. As we already know, dental implantology is a predictable science unless you know it, how to do it. You have to apply all the basic surgical skills along with adapt all the advanced prosthetic options. As you already know, this is a prosthetic driven implantology, and we have to concentrate on various surgical modalities like GBR, wrist lift, sinus lift, so as to manifest with your prosthetic driven implantology. So when I start my implantology, it was very vague topic for me to start 10 years back. We don't know when we place an implant. At that time, we don't know we have to do prosthesis also, and we have to take the follow-up also. We were depending on our prosthodontist for that during my PG course. Simultaneously, I started assisting them, I got educated regarding the prosthetic modules also. Later, when I come to my private practice, I make some checklists for the implantology. So this is a pathway which you see on the screen. It starts from the operative time, that is a 0 week when you start the surgery. There are few points we have to check at the time of operation. One is the intraoral, manage the intraoral bleeding. Then second is the manage various nerve injuries. Then the stability of your implants. And the most common, proper closure after implant placement. Next, after 1 to 2 weeks, you have to ask patient for the suture removal. At that time, you have to check some sort of exposures or the wound dehiscence. After that, the second checklist will be after 4 weeks. Then after 3 months. Then after 3 to 6 months. And the last checklist will be at the month of 7, at the 3 years. So we'll go step by step from the 0 weeks. At the time of 0 week, that is at the time of surgery, the first one we encounter with the most of the time is the bleeding. Second one is the nerve damage. Third one is the too low initial stability. Fourth one is just too high initial stability. Fifth one is the damage to adjacent tip. And most of the time, few times you will get the fracture of the implants. After that, we will go for the first checklist. For the first time, what we have to check? We have to check for wound dehiscence and the swelling. Most of the time, swelling subside after 4 to 5 days. But if there is persist some infection, then there will be a swelling and pain. So we have to check for wound dehiscence, swelling, pain, and also the GBR complications. Why do GBR complications happen? If you do not stabilize your membrane properly, sometimes after 2 weeks, the bone particles will come out. Also, there will be a dehiscence of your membrane if you don't stabilize due to some micro motions in your membrane. So this is your first checklist. And if you find that everything is properly, healing is proper, then you can remove your sutures. Then second checklist, after 4 weeks, this usually there will be a GBR infections, and you will find out some heating necrosis. For heating necrosis, you have to check the radiograph. At the 4th week, you have to always take a radiograph to check for the heating necrosis. What do you mean by heating necrosis? During your implant placement, when you have a high torque or the high stability, you will find some heating necrosis after 4 weeks, and the patient will have a dull aching pain at the same time. At that time, when you see the heating necrosis, there will be some radiolucency around the implant. So this is the best time you have to remove your implant and remove some granulation tissue, and you can reinsert the new implant of the wider diameter of the same length. After that, the third checklist, that will be after 3 months. That time, suppose your implant will get osseointegrated, and for the second surgery, we will ask patient to come for the gingival formal placement. So when the patient comes for the second surgery, check for the marginal bone resorption by the IOPA or the CBCT. Then check for your GBR failure. Then the most common is your fibrous encapsulation. This is again one of the complications when there is high stability or failure in the osseointegration. And most of the time, your implant is fine at the second checklist, but at the third checklist, you will find some infection due to some systemic condition of the patient. So it's always mandatory to have a checklist after every few months. The next checklist is the fourth checklist, that is from 3 to 6 months. The following, that is you have to check for the prosthetic complications. At the 3 to 6 months, we are okay with the prosthesis now. So you have to check for the contact point. This is the most common thing we have to check for the contact point. If there is no proper contact point, then there will be a food impaction in that area. Second thing, when you are placing your implants, there should not, when you are placing your prosthesis component over the implant, there should not be pain over the gingiva. If it occurs, then you have to relieve it. Then check for the occlusion stability, and sometimes there will be a fracture of the porcelain. And the next will be the, if you are doing a cement written prosthesis, then you have to check for the excess cement. Generally, when you do a cement written prosthesis, most of the time we are using a temporary cement. So rather than using a temporary cement, go for a zinc phosphate cement, or nowadays we are using a resin based temporary cement. So post-operative peri-implantitis chances will be very low if you use a resin based cement rather than using any other temporary cement. Please do not use the GIC cement for the cementation of the crowns. And fifth checklist is the passive fitness. This is the most important one. When you are using a screw retained prosthesis or screw retained crown, always check for the passive fitting. If you don't have a passive fitting of your implant, your prosthesis, then naturally there will be angular bone loss over the implant over the period of time. Therefore, you need a fifth checklist. So this is my fifth checklist after 6 months. we have to see for the angular bone loss. Angular bone loss, the main cause for the angular bone loss is your occlusion. If you don't have a good occlusion, if what do you mean by good occlusion means it's not that you have a proper intercuspation. The good occlusion means your cuspal inclination of the implant prosthesis should be at normally 5 degree only. It should not be in shallow prosthesis. If you have a shallow prosthesis, there will be uncontrolled forces on your implant and there will be angular bone loss. So in order to prevent the angular bone resorption, your cuspal inclination should be shallow, so that the forces will be on the midpoint of your implants. The second most common is the screw loosening. Again, if you don't have a passive fit, there may be a chances of screw loosening in case of screw return prosthesis. These all are the checklists till 6 months. Then you have to wait for 1 to 2 years and you have a final checklist after 3 years. The final checklist will be always mandatory to have a CBCT or X-ray, which is available in your clinic. So first thing, most of the time you will find a delayed implant failure because you had done early loading 3 years back, which is the most prominently done in today's scenario, but there might be a delayed implant failure after 3 years. Second one is screw fracture. This is also because screw fracture is always because of excessive forces on your prosthesis. Porcelain fracture is because of tight contacts, foot impaction because of open embrasures, and sometimes your framework will get fractures in case of overdenture. So what I feel, there should be this checklist is always mandatory in your private practice or even your college practice. Then the first thing which we encounter during our intra-op proceeds or at the time of zero checklist when you start your surgery, that is soft tissue bleeding. Whenever you give your incision with a 15 number scalpel, 15 number blade or 12 number blade, it should be deep enough to the periosteal so that you can have a leucoperiosteal flap elevation, because the blood vessels lie in between the periosteum and the soft and the connective tissue. So it should be full thickness flap so that you can manage some sort of soft tissue bleeding. Again, still there is a bleeding because of when you are doing an immediate extraction and implant placement, there may be always chance of granulation tissue. So this granulation tissue will bleed almost many a times. So in such cases, you have to apply some digital pressure with the gauze for 5 to 10 minutes so that it will get settled. Most of the time, when you are doing a full mouth case and giving in bigger incisions of approximately 7 to 8 mm, 8 centimeter, there may be soft tissue bleeding. So in such case, you have to clamp or use some ligating sutures for that. So soft tissue bleeding is one of the main cause of improper angulation in the implant placement. What generally I do for soft tissue bleeding management, soft tissue and always hard tissue, I always give an vitamin K injections prior to surgery in case of full mouth cases. Basically, one strike dose is okay, but if possible, give at least 3 doses for before your surgery, 3 days before your surgery. So you will have a good hemostatic action at the time of surgery. The drawback of this vitamin K is the patient should not have some cardiac issue or cardiac issue. Second thing, to stop bleeding, you should always monitor the patient's vitals. This always play a major role while doing an implant surgery. See, most of the people say that bleeding management is not a bigger issue, but when you are working for implant placement with bleeding issues, there will be an issue with the angulation of your implant. You will not have command where to place your implant. So that is more important, how you place, at what angle you place your implant, because what implantology we are practicing is an medullary implantology. That means you are placing your implant in the medulla. So you should have a proper cortical bone in between the implants. That is mandatory. Whenever you change your angulations, there might be some perforations. So this is the soft tissue bleeding. This is how you can manage the soft tissue bleeding. Sometimes ligation of with absorbable silk material, you should use them figure of 8 for the soft tissues. Then we'll go for the hard tissue bleeding. There are two types of hard tissue bleeding when you do drilling. First one is a diffuse bleeding. Diffuse bleeding happens when you grind the edges of your alveolar ridge. So grind it properly and use some apply some pressure. It will stop. Diffuse bleeding will always stop unless the patient should not have a high BP. If a patient is having a higher blood pressure, then the diffuse bleeding stop is difficult. Second thing, what I want to say, always when you are doing this surgery, implant surgery, go for this PT-INR test. I'm practicing since last 10 years, but from last 2 to 3 years, I started doing the PT-INR test. I find that most of the people, 50 to 60%, they are having a deranged PT-INR ratios. That might be because of fever, history of fever 15 to 20 days back, or some sort of viral infection. So now in the corona era, I guess we all should have to do an PT-INR for every patient who are going for implant surgery. It might be for the single implants or for the multiple implants. So PT-INR have a major role for to evaluate the bleeding tendency of the patient. Because once again I repeat, proper angulation of your implant placement is always mandatory to have a prosthetic driven implantology. It's always a art. So my first sentence, dental implantology is a predictable science unless you know how to do it. Now second one is your moderate bleeding. Moderate bleeding is the endogenous bleeding which is from the marrow spaces. It mainly occurs when you have a D3 or D4 quality of bone. There is a lacunae filled in the inside the bone. There is a lacunae filled with the bone which will get spurs out and will have a moderate bleeding. So once you place the implant in such area, the bleeding will stop. And the third one is the severe bleeding. Severe bleeding happens when you accidentally perforate the inferior canal. You will have a paresthesia, then again, and also you have a bleeding. So always rectify with the X-rays when you are placing a pilot drill. So if you want to avoid the severe bleeding, just take an X-ray after a pilot drill or 2.0 drill. If you find it so close to there now, you can reduce your length of your drills. Then now next is the maxillary sinus lift. While doing a maxillary sinus lift, sometimes you will encounter with them bleeding issues. This maxillary sinus is evidently supplied by various blood vessels from which are the branch of internal carotid artery. The two main branches of internal carotid artery which apply the maxillary sinus is the infraorbital artery and the posterior superior artery. Infraorbital artery doesn't make any difference because it's in the medial aspect, but posterior superior artery makes a difference. Posterior superior artery has then two branches. Number one is your extraosseous branch, and one is the interosseous branch. So this is your extraosseous artery, and inside there is an interosseous artery. So how to calculate an interosseous artery or extraosseous artery? For extraosseous artery, we don't have anything to calculate, just some landmarks. And for the interosseous artery, you can check with your CBCT or the CT scan. You will get a notch over the lateral wall of your sinus. So that notch is always with the intraosseous artery, which is a branch of superior posterior artery. Both of them bleed, and it makes difficult to elevate the sinus membrane. So small bleeding is always then bleeding. It doesn't mean that we can arrest it, but it's made difficult to elevate your membrane and do the grafting in such scenario. So there are particular landmarks to avoid the bleeding while sinus lift. So this is a bony window which we can make. So how to design this bony window? The anterior margin of your bony window should be 1 to 2 mm close to the. It should be close to the wall of the sinus, and 5 mm distal from the vertical incisor line. Vertical incisor line we can draw, which is parallel to the close to the distal surface of your second premolar or to beside your sinus. And the inferior margin is 2 mm above the sinus floor. then the posterior margin according to your implant placement. But the main focus you have to make on the superior margin. Superior margin should always be 5 to 7 mm above the inferior margin. So vertical height of your bony window should be 5 to 7 mm only. It should not be more than 7 mm. You have a liberty to increase the width of the design of the bone window, but you don't have a liberty to increase the vertical height of your superior margin. If you have a edentulous fresh patient, you can always have a checklist with the 19 mm. You will get your inferior artery or intraosseous artery, and of 23 you will have your extraosseous artery. But for that you should have at least 8 mm of your alveolar height. If you have a less than 8 mm of your alveolar height, then go for the sinus landmarks or the floor of the sinus landmark rather than going for alveolar ridge. Okay, I think everybody got it. Yeah. Then how to control the bleeding? The most common which you routinely use as an maxillofacial surgery is the bone wax. But when you use a bone wax, it's always and place the implant. It's always a chance of infection there. So most commonly Cola-Tape is used. It's absorbable and it also acts as a graft. Then pressure is one of the best things. I always apply pressure for 5 to 10 minutes and stop the surgical procedure. So ultimately it stops. Sometimes you need, when you have an intense bleeding from the inferior canal with the high BP, you will need some electrocauterization. Recently, I'm using it, and you have to wait till the hemostat occurs. After that, only you have to start your surgery. Otherwise, you have to postpone. Many times, I had postponed my surgeries when I'm doing my surgeries of the lower anterior region, the reserve bridge. There is some called as lingual foramen, from where there is a spot of lingual branch of one of the lingual artery or some incisive artery. Most of the time it's the incisive artery only. It bleeds profound in the old age, so you have to stop sometime. It's difficult to manage. And the second thing I encountered during one of my sinus surgeries, intraosseous artery was bleeding, so I was unable to elevate the membrane because of perforation. So it's always mandatory to control the bleeding rather than taking this casually, if for implant surgery at least. When you have a good field, when you have a healthy field, when you have a clean field, it's your implant placement and the graft placement is very good, because this is a precise surgery. It's not like our onco surgery. I simultaneously do an onco and implant also, so I find it different. I find this implant surgery as a difficult one because it should have a skill for that. The second most common thing is your nerve damage. So when you are talking about the nerve damage, there are few nerves in the head and neck area, but most commonly which we encounter is your mental nerve and the inferior nerve. Sometimes you will get an paresthesia of the infraorbital nerve when you are doing a sinus surgery. During sinus surgery, if you take an irrelevant big flap and a huge retraction, then in the initial cases, there might be some sort of retraction and paresthesia of the infraorbital artery. Again, while doing in the upper canine or the premolar area GBR, we use a wide reflection of flap. At that time also you will have an injury to the infraorbital nerve. So during tooth surgery, always notice that there is something called as infraorbital nerve, and you should respect that nerve. Otherwise, you will have a numbness for few weeks or months. Then second most common thing is commonly and the most prominent is your mental nerve damage. Mental nerve damage is the mental nerve injury which always or most of the time is below the second molar, and you have to and again it is having some loop. We will discuss later how much away you should be from the loop. So when you are doing a lower second molar GBR, you should always have to dissect your periosteum, so that you should retract your mental nerve, so that you can properly have a closure of your GBR and you will not damage your mental nerve. And third one is your inferior nerve damage, which is mainly due to lower jaw implantation in the posterior area due to inadequate planning and the placement of more length of implant. See, when you are going to posterior mandible region, maximum length 10 mm is always sufficient. Don't go don't go more than 10 mm for the length of your implant. So what I practice in the posterior area, I go maximum up to 10 mm of the length, and the wider implant minimum should be, or optimum should be 4.5 to 5. So this is the standard one for your posterior implants. So don't go above 10 mm of the implant in the posterior area. In case you have atropic mandible, then you can have a short implant of 7 mm, and you can again you have a vertical augmentation with the with your grafting. Then another small nerve is your nasopalatal nerve. It doesn't make any difference. It mainly occurs when you do an upper central incisor implant. But when you have atropic over the buccal cortex in the maxillary area, sometimes you have to place your implant in the nasopalatal foramen also. So it doesn't make any significant of nasopalatal nerve damage. What I feel. Then sometimes you have anterior inferior alveolar nerve damage. This is during the chin grafting. So always you have to take precaution for your incisive nerve damage. There are some common classifications for the nerve injury. Sedan, Sunderland classifications. So we'll go with the only 3 terms of Sedan classification. One is neuropraxia, another is axanthomesis, and third one is your neuratomesis. What do you mean by neuropraxia? It's a nerve degeneration. It's not the degeneration of the nerve. It's due to local ischemia. Why this local ischemia occur in the implantology? See, when you press and when you are close to your nerve, always there is a compression to the nerve, and it will cause a neuropraxia. It will be for next one week or 2 weeks, and it will get subside. When we talk about neuropraxia and implants, there are some clarification. You can't decide at the time of implant placement, but you can judge your patient will have a neuroplasia or not. I will explain it later how you have to judge if the patient is having neuroplasia or not at a time. It's very difficult to judge because it's a symptoms. It's not an science. And another is the axanthomesis, which are almost the cutting of the axons due to continuous compression of your nerve, and there will be a Varalian degeneration of the axons. Partly or most of the time, you can get a whole recovery of the neuropraxia and the axonomesis, but it's difficult when you have a nerve injury of the neurotomesis. That is always a cutting of the nerve. Even you do any surgery, microsurgery, there will not be any. It's very difficult to do a surgery also intracanally of the inferior nerve. So never go for neurotomesis of your nerve. Now, the most common thing, how to protect your nerve injury. That is the basic thing. To protect the inferior nerve, precise determining of the mandibular canal position using your X-ray and CBCT. But still, what I feel, there is some drawback here, X-rays or the CBCT. When you have a faint line of the superior border of your inferior canal, you can't appreciate most of the time in your CBCT also. And sometimes there are horizontal fibers of your inferior nerve. So, if you find some situation, if you don't find the superior margin of your inferior canal, then say you have to be 2 mm away from the arbitrary drawn superior margin of your nerve. So you will not come across your horizontal fibers also. This mainly happens in case of D4 bone. And in D4 bone also there is a profuse bleeding, so you can't justify what type of, if there is some nerve injury or something else is there. And second thing which I want to tell about mandibular canal is, see, now whenever there is a bleeding from the inferior nerve, you should be sure that you have some neuropraxia or nerve injury, because nerve comes first, then the artery. So this is a landmark that you will have a nerve injury definitely when you have any occurred an inferior nerve bleeding. So stop at that time, check for the nerve injury for next 2 to 3 weeks, and you can place implant after 1 month. With the shorter length and the wider diameter in the same osteotomy site. That is more important. Yeah. Next one is how to protect the mental nerve. Whenever we have to place the implant in the premolar area, but the issue with the premolar area at the apices of your premolar roots, you will have an mental foramen adjacent to it. Sometimes it's overlapping to your inferior, to your apex of the second premolar. So it's very difficult to justify how to do. So at that time, you have to do a wide exposure of your mental nerve. Again, when you have an atropic jaw, in atropic mandibular jaw, at that time, most of the time it will be on the crest of your mandible. So always have a wide exposure of mental nerve when you are in doubt of your mental nerve. Now the third one is your lingual nerve. This if you most of the time it doesn't come across this lingual nerve, but when you have an uh, wrong angulation of your drills, you can injure the lingual nerve. So best thing to do is your place a thin periosteum in the lingual surface of your bone when you raise the mucoperiosteal flap on the lingual side. This practice routinely we do in your third molar surgery. We put your periosteum in the lingual pouch when you do a distal bone guttering in the third molar surgery. Now, there is when you talk about the mental foramen has a loop anteriorly of approximately 3 mm, and your implant should be at least 2 mm away from the distal part of the loop. So your implant placement should be 5 mm away from the mental foramen. You got this? It's always mandatory. You should be 5 mm away from the mental foramen. So last implant which you place should be 2. In full mouth cases, you should place implant in 2, 4, 6 rather than going for 5. 2 means lateral, 4 means first premolar, then your molar. So 2, 4, 6 on other side, 2, 4, 6 on another side. So you have a all on 6 concept there. Or you can go for 2, 3, 6. This will also work when your foramen is near to your first premolar. So basically, you have to preserve your nerve when you are doing these elective surgeries in case of atopic ridge and the other thing. Otherwise, patient will sue you. Next, there are some abnormalities in the mental foramens. What is shown on the pictures. Here you can find the 3 branches directly arising from the mandible without any loop. These are here we can find the loop. Here we can find the multiple branches. So there always you need a wide exposure with the partial periosteal dissection. This is mandatory to do partial. Don't go for a full thick dissection. Just go for a partial dissection. You will have a good exposure of your mental nerve. And trust me, you will not have any paresthesia. Mild retraction paresthesia might be there in a few cases only. Now, this is the most important thing which you have to know that about the inferior nerve injury. See, when you are using your palate drill, it's of 2 mm. When you touch the nerve with the 2 mm drill, you will hardly have a neuropraxia. But when you use your 3 mm drill, then you may land up with an axontomosis or the neurotomosis. So final determination of length should be done along with your only with your palate drill. So there are some 5 pictures. Number 1 is almost a partial implant drill intrusion into the mandibular canal can cause direct mechanical inferior nerve trauma, which may cause a primary ischemia and which might be reversible. It might be just a neuropraxia. Second picture, you can see the full implant drill intrusion into the mandibular canal can cause direct transection of the inferior nerve, and it might be a primary injury, but it may be a permanent damage, or grade 4 or grade 5 degree injury. Third one is a partial implant drill intrusion into the mandibular canal can cause indirect trauma due to hematoma or the secondary ischemia, which may get subside within the 1 month, which injury will get subside within the 1 month. Fourth one, it's also one of the dangerous. So you will get a thermal stimulus or the EOP, the peri-implantitis of the bone, and it will cause a necrosis, and you will have a post-operative inferior nerve damage. So there should not be heat necrosis. It will also damage. When you will have a heat necrosis, it will also damage your nerve also. And the picture E, thermal injury can evade permanently or the primary damage also. This is regarding drilling sequence. When you find encounter one of these pictures in your practice, just stop for next few days or few weeks. See the symptoms from the patient of nerve injury, and ultimately after few weeks you can do an implant placement with the wider diameter and shorter length. than your implant injury. It's almost same, but you have to be you have to be very precautious while placing the implants in such cases. Generally, when you are close to nerve, I'm using an drills from the crystal where we drills which you use for the sinus lift. That's a crystal approach drills. That is a casket which available with some of your companies. So when you are close to nerve or the superior portion of your inferior nerve, it will not damage the nerve. It will not cause any thermal injury. So these are the best drills when you have an atrophic ridge. Once you are close to nerve also, you will not have any issues or any paresthesia. So I recommend to use a casket when you do a implant placement in the posterior mandible in the atrophic jaw, and we want to place a shorter implants. This is the classification given by the Gion. When you have a nerve injury with the 2 mm drill, ultimately you will have a neuropraxia, and when you use a 3 mm drill, you will have a axanthomesis. So better to use a diagnostic X-ray when you use a 2 mm drilling rather than going for a 3 mm drilling. Wait for 1 week, still numbness, then remove your implants. And if you 3 to 4 weeks, the total recovery, and we can do an implant replacement. Most of the time, when you place the implant, numbness occurs. This is we have to wait for 1 week because numbness might be because of edema. If the edema if edema subsides within a week by your some steroidal therapy and the multivitamins like Neurobion 4, then you can do a prosthesis after 3 months. But if you find that still there is a paresthesia after 1 to 2 weeks in your first checklist, then you have to remove the implant. So there is a need for second checklist. So evaluate the nerve injury also. Now this is one of the thing which you have to know, that is the stability. To check the stability, we have a stability machine which will cost around 1 to 1.5 lakh. So stability is calculated in the ISQ values. So normal ISQ for after your implant placement should be 60 to 70 range. So you can do, if you have a normal stability of 60 to 70, then you can do an immediate loading in few patients. So ISQ value is always important for the immediate loading cases. And for progressive also you should have a stability machine for that. So progressive loading, immediate loading, without ISQ value, you should not, without knowing the ISQ value of that implant, don't go for placement of your implants. So when you have a too low stability, stability can also be checked with your torque also. When you have a torque of less than 5 Newton or 10 Newtons, you will have low stability. And when you have a torque of more than 50 NCM, then you will have a high stability. So after preparation, if you find that you have a low stability of your implants, so then you have to change the implant to the another options. You have a few new modalities of implant present nowadays. That is coating implant, plasma coating with some hydroxyapatite or the calcium hydroxide coated. So this generally works in low stability area. And you have a progressive loading. Progressive loading means you can load after 6 months. Just you have to wait for 6 months. Regarding low stability, what I feel, I had done few implants with 5 to 10 mm of stability. It works. Most of the time it works. But how can you check the low stability? Another clinical criteria is take your Explorer and with your Explorer just held it on the cover screw and find if there is any micro motion there. If it doesn't find any micro motion there, that means your torque is more than 5, and there is no need to remove the implant unless still you are having low stability. So this is one of the clinical signs in case of low stability to check if you have to remove the implant or not. But there should be a progressive loading rather than loading it after 3 months. Then and the most dangerous thing is the high initial stability. Whenever you find an high initial stability, you have to always apply and reverse torque for that. Reverse torque means if your implant is almost 2 threads are left and your torque is almost 70 to 80 NCM, then you have to make in 2 to 4 reverse these directions 2 to 4 times reverse directions, and then you go for the forward direction. So this will help to reduce the high stability of your implant. And second thing, you have to use a cortical drill. Otherwise, you just remove your, if you half of the implant is inside your bone, and you get its you get a torque of 50 to 60, then you have to remove your implant and then use them some cortical drills or tap drills available in your kit. And otherwise, you can do another thing. You can change the small diameter implants if you are. It's not possible for you to do a use a cortical drill because of thin buccal or the lingual cortex. Then go for a smaller diameter of implant with the longer implants, longer length. So you have to do a osteotomy with the same drills. What I prefer, when there is an high initial stability of the implants, I know it before with the experience. But in few cases, what I do over osteotomy. If I want to place an implant of 4.5 mm of diameter, I do a osteotomy of 5 mm in case of D1 bone. So I want my implant to be passively fit in the bone. There should not be compression over the implant site. Now next, Shinoy sir, I am audible, no? Shinoy sir? Shinoy sir?
Yes, you are audible,
Yeah.
Vipin.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
I had
Now,
kept myself muted. Vipin,
yes, sir.
there are a lot of questions coming. So
Yeah, just 1 minute. 1 minute. I have to just complete 2 points.
Yeah,
Damage. Now there is a damage to the adjacent teeth. Most of the time, it mostly happens in the lower anterior region. Lower anterior region, we have a small diameters of the lower anteriors. So when you want to place an implant in lower central, it's always difficult to place an implant because of mesiodistal small mesiodistal diameters. So in such cases, you have to use an MS implants or the one-piece implants in such cases of 3 mm or 2.5 diameters. What I find when you if you damage to adjacent teeth, sometimes in lower anteriors, my implant is very close to the natural teeth, roots of the natural teeth. Almost it get attached to the cementum of your natural teeth. But what I find, unless it's vital, you don't get. There is no any issues with the follow-up of last 5 years. Your implant touches to your tooth, there is no issues. But if you find some non-vital tooth, then you have to do a RC. But most of the time, your tooth is not affected when your implant touches the tooth. So don't go for a directly RC, root canal of the adjacent teeth. Wait for a few days, see for pain or some sensations. If it doesn't happen, don't go for root canal. None of your tooth will be get affected, nor your implant. So there are some few queries that how the osseointegrated what about osseointegration when your implant get fused to attached to your adjacent? No issues. Your implant will get osseointegrated. When you have two missing premolars, how to justify and with the narrow ridges? If you have an 11 mm of mesiodistal width, then only go for a single implant, and you can have a mesial cantilever for that. Second tooth should be a mesial cantilever. It works. When you have a 12 mm of mesiodistal diameters, go for a 2 implants of 3.5 diameters. When you have a 30 mm of mesiodistal width, then you can go for a 2 implants of 3.5 diameters. When you have 14 or 15 mm, go for a 4 mm of diameter. When you are in the premolar area, you have to place an implant of diameter of 4 mm. But less height you can manage with 3.5 also. So this is how you can manage when you have a missing 2 premolars. Same thing you can do with other teeth. You have to always manage your space before implant placement. You can stop here, sir. Shinoy sir? Shinoy sir?
Vipin, I had kept my mic off actually.
Yes.
That it doesn't disturb you.
We can start with some questions, I guess.
Okay. So there are a lot of questions that have come in. I will start asking from the first one.
Yes, sir.
There are many top-notch implantologists here. Rajesh, who just had a talk recently, Jambure. Then Dr. Rajshekhar Halli, Varsha Manekar Madam, Harshvardhan Arya, Praveen Sundarkar. They've all joined. Tushar, Sandeep, all big shots have
Nice to
joined.
see all big shots for my small presentation.
And Dr. Dhore, many people. Forgive me if I'm forgetting them. So the question from Varsha is, I will ask you, if one or two rings of implants are exposed at the second stage, should we consider as failed implant?
No, if one ring of the implant is exposed, don't do anything. It will work. Because
Yeah.
if approximately if you have a 10 mm of implants, your 9 mm is vastly integrated. You will not have any perimplantitis. You will not have, but you should have a good soft tissue cover over it. You should have a thick cover of soft tissue over that. If you have a thin cover of soft tissue over that, then you have to go for a GBR.
Okay.
Yeah, GBR is mandatory when you have a thin genotype of your gingiva. For thick, it always works. There will not be any issue for that. What I feel. We have a cases of one thread exposed with a thick gingiva. You can't see in the oral cavity also because of this is a blessing of keratinized tissue to implantologist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is consent needed for vitamin K therapy, considering the possible
I
complications?
always send the patient to physician. That is his roll call. I never give in my clinic.
Okay.
But better to give. I don't find anything. Most of the time they call me why you have a normal coagulation profile and all. But I always feel to give. I always ask them to give at least a single dose for that. If they resist for 3 doses, it always works, sir. Sometimes if today a patient bleeds, and if you call after one week with vitamin K injection, it doesn't bleed with the same hemodynamic conditions. It works. It always works. I learned it from RST.
One question that comes to my mind, my own question,
Yeah.
is that when you place an implant in the let us say we consider the harmless region, that is the lower anterior region, right? So in
Yes, sir.
this is sometimes if you are not careful about the angulation, and it could go through the lingual part, the sublingual area.
Yeah.
It could come out of the bone and it could cause a lot of bleeding, causing something like Coleman sign. That could damage the sublingual vessels.
Yeah, I had heard about this. I had never encountered with such injury. I most of the time I stop when I find some issue with the angulation and change my drilling sequence.
Right.
Yeah, but always it's life-threatening when you have such conditions. When I am attending some lectures with some Korean people, they have shown me such cases that admitted the patient directly to the hospital and give the therapies for him. Or they take the patient to the OT and expose and ligate the sublingual artery.
Okay.
But it's always difficult to ligate a sublingual artery when you are in the dental chair. So what I feel is such condition occurs in your clinic. I take the patient, put some pressure pack over it, take immediately patient to the nearby hospital and start. You can get a ligation. But what I feel, bleeding doesn't kill the people, but you should know how to manage it.
Yes, obviously.
Yeah.
So there are some residents who want to know what is Colatape.
Colatape is nothing but the collagen membrane, type 1 collagen membrane. It's a block, and it also used as a grafting material as well as for the hemostatic purpose.
Okay.
In India, it's available with few companies, standard companies. Nowadays, there are fake Colatape which doesn't have much amount of collagen. If you have a proportion of 70% of collagen, it will act as a hemostatic agent. I forget one point. Along with the Colatape, you can use then betadine also. Betadine is also a good hemostatic agent. What I am generally using it. It's a good hemostatic. If you don't have a Colatape, you can use soak betadine gauze of 10% of betadine. It will also work as a hemostatic agent.
Yeah, and betadine is good in COVID times also.
COVID is also right, sir.
Okay. Athar wants to know, he has added two questions. Is there any role of B12 or Neurobion in management of axonotmesis? That is one question. And then he has got another one.
Yeah, there is a role but you have to give in combination with some steroid therapy. Individually, it doesn't have much role, but if you give with some steroids, See, pattern with axonal or with axonal matrices, there might be some edema. So your edema gets subsides with some steroids, and the neurobian fort will, along with some Dexona will increase the axonal conduction. So once the axonal conduction get increased, you will have some 80% of recovery from the patient. So it works. It doesn't. You don't have any option for that. So you have to use it. What I feel, Athal. Yeah. You got my point, Athal?
And दूसरा question ये था अतर का, he wants to know the role of primary stability in implant prognosis. Does the amount of contact osteogenesis and distant osteogenesis have a role in long-term prognosis?
So can you repeat the question? It's a long question actually.
I think there are 2-3 questions here. Okay. What is the role of primary stability in implant prognosis? That is one. Then you answer that. Then I'll ask his.
Yeah.
Okay, he's taking revenge because he was asked questions 1 year back. Now he wants to ask questions.
No issues. No issues. I guess I will answer you all the questions.
Yeah.
First one is the primary stability or initial stability. Right?
Yeah.
I had already explained that if you have a stability of ISQ value more than 60 to 70, you will have a good stability. But if you have poor stability, then you have to change your implant size. You have to go for the bigger implant. But in case if you have a stability less than 40 or 40 or 50, or torque less than 5. See, there is a difference between stability and the torque. So practically you use a torque also as a stability, and stability machine is also stability. So I am giving it 2 different points. If you have a torque more than 5, and your primary stability, you can go for a progressive loading. If you have a stability more than 40, you can go for a progressive loading.
Okay.
So most of the time it works in D2 or D3 bone. No issues. D4 bone, sometimes you will get a failure in the implants. Second question, sir.
Second question is, does the amount of contact osteogenesis and distant osteogenesis have a role in long-term prognosis?
See, it's all depend on the BIC ratio of your implants. How much you have a bone implant contact ratio. It depends on that. It doesn't depend on anything other else. Next question, sir.
Okay. I think we'll have one last question. This is from Jignesh. What is your opinion on using low-level laser irradiation for nerve regeneration and its functional improvement? I think
in case of
soft tissue lasers.
Yeah, you can use in soft tissue lasers for that. No issues. Always have a lasers that is called as a biostimulation mode. In implant, they have a biostimulation mode. Sometimes biostimulation mode or biostimulation works. Again, the biostimulation will reduce the edema, and it will have a increase the axonal conduction of your nerve. So it always helpful. No issues. Low intensifying biostimulation implant in the implant socket, you can use it. And after that, you can close it as a socket preservation with the graft. It's a good idea.
Right. Are you dealing with the sinus lift later or no? That's over.
That's already sinus lift has been covered by Akshay sir. So I had not much focus on it, and also in the wrist
so
split
maybe
also.
We put it at the end. There is one complimentary message which has been sent to you on WhatsApp. If you want, you can just check it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yeah.
So I'll ask this question later actually, because I think we need to go ahead.
Yeah. Now the next topic is small mistakes in drilling. These are not small. Some mistakes in drilling. Some mistakes in drilling are not small. They are the magnified. They will hamper your implant position. So first one is the improper pilot hole position. When you find that the improper pilot, this is the Krishna of your implantology, pilot drill. If you miss the proper pilot drill insertion hole, then everything is gone. Then you will have a buccal cantilever, you have mesial cantilever, you will have a distal cantilever, or you will have an bulging of crowns. So always first drill is always you should know how to use, where to use, and you should have a proper vision for that. That is why I always tell you, you should not have a bleeding. If you are bleeding, you will mistake your pilot point. So pilot drill is always mandatory, but there are few conditions when we have a pilot drill. You miss the midpoint or the area where you want to make a pilot drill. So you can make a new hole adjacent to the pilot drill. or you can use a lateral extension drill. This is available with few companies, lateral extension drills. They are of two size. One is of 2 mm, another is of 3.5 mm or 4 mm. So whenever you find that your osteotomy is somewhat mesially or somewhat distally, somewhat buccally, somewhat lingually, you can correct with your lateral cutting drills. So always use a lateral cutting drill when you miss your palatal point. How to manage if you miss your palate drill point and you use another osteotomy drills. So if you find that your new hole is 2 mm above, 2 mm below 2 mm, then there is no need of any grafting, or just use a membrane over it. If the hole is above 2 mm, then go for membrane along with the grafting. Second one is the improper angulation of a drill. When you do an osteotomy, why there is an improper angulation of drill, I will explain. Improper angulation of drill is because of inappropriate angulation of the alveolar bone which is there in your oral cavity of mandible and maxilla. So improper angulation is always related to the improper angulation of your alveolus. I will explain how they differ in the angulations. Again, you have to use when you have an difficulty in angulation. When you find the difficulty of angulation in the second drill or third drill, you can use a side cutting drill and you can correct it easily. There is no issues when if you have an improper angulations. You can correct with it nowadays. You can correct with the lateral drills or the side cutting drills. Initially, with the kids, when we started with the Nobel, there were no lateral cutting drills, and with few systems, I guess, Ankylos and all, it doesn't have this lateral cutting drills. So one or two times I failed with Ankylos, I guess. Now the ovoid implant drilling site. Ovoid implant drilling site is the osteotomy is bigger than the implant size. So you will have an poor initial stability for that. You have to change to the wider diameter. And if you don't want to change to the wider diameter, you can use some bone chips for that. But with the too big defect and with the too low initial stability, you get to directly go for the socket preservation rather than placing the implants. It mainly occurs when you are doing an immediate implant placement in the second molar. It's very difficult. Two areas, it's very difficult to do an osteotomy. One is your lower anterior, which already I explained. The second is the second molar. See, second molar is blessed with and the mandible is blessed. Second molar is blessed with an proximity to the inferior nerve, and in maxilla it's blessed with the sinus cavity. Again, it's blessed with the reduced mouth opening in the posterior area. So it's very difficult to take an angulation in the posterior second molar. So you have to use a short drills. So nowadays, in the surgical drills, there are separate drills present of 7 mm, 8 mm, 8.5 mm, 10 mm, 11 mm. Initially, there were adding and all. Initially, they were having a single drill with all the diameters starting from the 6 mm to the 11 mm. In such cases, definitely there will be an angulation issue, poor angulation issue, or you can find out some avoid implant drilling also. Now, while doing osteotomy or on the surgical aspects, bone density is the key determination for the clinical success. Bone conditions always determine your primary stability. This is a photograph from the MISH, which will indicate the D1, D2, D3, and the D4 bones. When you have almost 80 to 90% of the cortical bone and few hardly 10% of the cancerous bone, it is a D1 bone. The problem with D1 bone is that you will have less bleeding in that because of less nutrient foramen in it, and the chances of osseointegration in such cases, D1 bone is very difficult. So there is a trick for this. It's $1 million trick. When you are getting a D1 bone or the basal bone is also a D1 bone. Just go for a over osteotomy, or you can use a cortical drill or a tap drill for that. And the second thing which I want to tell, place your implants. And when you are placing your implant, 80% of your implant should go passively. Only 20% should remain, which will go aggressively. so that there will be a less compression over your bone, and you will not have any heating necrosis regarding it. Then we'll go for the D2. D2 and D3 bone are the good for the implant placement. In D2, you will have almost 20% of cortical, 40% of cortical bone, and 70% of 60% of your cancerous bone. D3 is also good for an implant placement, but you should know how to place you have to use an undersized drill for the D3 or D3 osteotomy. This is mandatory. Suppose you have to place an 4.5 diameter of implant, your last drill in the D3 bone should be approximately 4 mm of diameter. So drilling, you should justify that you should change your drilling thickness according to the quality of your bone. I always change it, and when I have a D3 bone or D4 bone, I always go for a Densa. I always go for a Densa. Densa is good for the soft. Basically, it works with the bone plasticity. It always expands the bone. We have to use it in the reverse fashion. So it will act on the centrifugal force and it will deposit the bone. When you are doing drilling, it always it is under centripetal area. So it will remove the bone. But when you use a Densa, it will be a centrifugal force. So it will deposit the osteotomy bone inside your bony area, and it will also expand it. So in case of narrow reed, in case of D3 or D4 bone, I always go for a Densa. It's a costly one, but it's always good for, because when you go for a D4 bone, you will not get an initial stability when you are using a routine drills. For D4 bone, you have to be always 2 drills short of your implant size. Otherwise, very difficult and to get an initial stability. And once you doesn't get an initial stability in the D4 bone, your implant will get failed. D2 and the D3 bone is the best bone for the osseointegration. I already explained it. These are the cross sections. See, this is when you see the cross sections, you will find some lacunae in the cross sections. This lacunae is filled with the blood, and sometimes when you do an osteotomy, you will have a diffuse bleeding. But the bleeding stops when you place your implant. So don't worry regarding bleeding in such cases. When you have a D3 or D4 bone with the lacunae. Always you should have an X-ray for that. You always check the X-ray. So what will see in the CT scan or CBCT? How you know which type of bone it is? So there are some HFU units to evaluate the bone density. It's always when you keep your cursor on the bone in the area where you want to place implant. On the left side of your software, you see the how much HFU of the quality of bone is there. So more than 1250 HFU, you will have a D1 bone. 850 to 1250, you will have an D2 bone. 350 to 850, you will have a D3 bone. D4 150 to 350, you will have a D4 bone, and less than 150 is your extraction socket, that is D5. I already told D1 bone is a too hard bone. I'm always scared about this D1 bone. So drilling should be in the pumping motion with an increased torque. So this is one mandatory. When you do an osteotomy in the D1 bone, you should have an increased torque. But nowadays, I have used almost 7 to 8 types of this physio dispensers. They doesn't have an option to increase the torque. So now I purchased an Cavo Expert Search physio dispenser, where the torque can be increased up to the 80. And I always prefer increased torque once you have, because in Indian scenario, we doesn't change our surgical kit after 100 implants or 150 implants. So it's always mandatory to change. But if you don't change with the low torque, that is 40 to 50, I guess WH has 50 torque, your drills get sometimes vibrate, which will again mismatch your osteotomy sites. So nowadays I start using that 80 torque for almost all the drilling sequences. So 80 torque, with the 80 torque, will get a smooth pumping motion of your drilling, and also your drills will not get vibrate. So you will not fracture your cortical bone, rather buccal or lingual. So, and you will have command of how to use command over the drill, how much penetration you are doing, how much buccolingually it's going. So, I prefer to use an increased torque. Second one is always use a new drill for the D1 bone with the cooling saline, or always use an isotonic saline in the refrigerator. And sometimes you can use a tap drill for that, or the cortical drill given in the kit almost correspond to that particular area. And in such cases, in D1 bone, you have to use a hand ratchet for implant placement. When you are placing the implant, I have already informed you have to, your 80% of the implant should be go passively in D1 bone. Only 20% should have a aggressively tightening. When it goes passively 80%, you will not have a compression over the D1 bone, and there will not be any ischemia. Then for the D4 bone, you have to reduce the RPM up to 300 mm, use an 2 drill shot, and put a wider implant. Otherwise, you can, I always tell you can use a densaber for that in the reverse fashion. Then if you have a lingual or buccal plate perforations, stop drilling immediately and redirect your angulations. And in the perforation area, if it's in the buccal side, use an absorbable membrane, GBR membrane. If it's on the lingual side, it's difficult to use a membrane on the lingual side. And last one is the implant thread exposure, which I had already explained. If you have marginal bone dimension above 1 mm and the thick biotype, no graft is necessary. If you have marginal bone dimensions above 1 mm and thin biotype, you have to always go for a GBR. Above 2 rate exposed with absorbable membrane, you have to manage it, and you have to use some autograft in it with the autobone collector. Now there are various refined drills are available. We can take the adjacent bone and use an autogenous strip. But if you have a cortical, if you have a more buccal cortical area, exposure, then you get to use a xenograph for that, because xenograph can prolong absorption, so it will maintain the cortical area in the buccal area. So I prefer xenograph along with the autograph. And the last thing is the sharp. Sometimes you have a sharp bony crest, which will again lead to implanted exposure. So you have to smooth it up to the what appropriate diameter you want, but for that you should have a particular length for it, length of the mandible or the maxilla. Then what are the failures in the osteointegrations? One of the common thing is the thermal damage on surgery. Thermal damage, we can use in good kits, new kits with the proper torque. You can avoid the thermal damage with the coolant. Second one is infection. Infection is not in our hand, but you have to make an optimum. You can do an optimum sterilization while doing an implant surgery. It's not like any other surgery. You have to make, you should be absolutely sure that your implant should not get infected, and you should again your implant which you are using should not get it should not be expired. Nowadays, some last thing is the micro movement during the bone healing period. Micro movements in implants generally happens when you use an immediate loading of your implants. So there should not be micro movements. So with the process which you are using, you have to avoid it. Yes, any questions, please? Shimai sir.
Yeah, Vipin, give me 2 minutes to unmute myself. There is one question which I would like to ask actually, to clear my own doubts, The question is, what is the difference between an ailing and a failing implant? Ailing and failing. Ailing, A-I-L-I-N-G, ailing and failing implant.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is something, there are signs by which, as I understand, that an ailing implant is one where you do an intervention to save it. A failing implant is one where you may need to do something very drastic, like maybe, doing grafting and all to save it. And of course, the failed implant is one which you have in your hand from the patient's mouth.
Basically, you have to see the BIC ratio. That's all. Bone implant contact ratio. If it's more than 50%, then your implant because implant get integrated. If you don't have that, prognosis of that is for the prognosis of the implant. So BIC should always be mandatory to see. But it's difficult to see the BIC. You have to have a scan for that.
We have Dr. Abhay Datarkar, who is
Yes.
of the department and a very great implantologist who joined us. Welcome, Abhay.
Sir, thank you. Sir,
sir.
as it was the question regarding ailing implant and failing implant.
Yeah.
You are absolutely right, sir, what you said. Ailing implants can be saved. And the procedure for saving those implants, it is not always like the bone to implant contact should be minimum 50%. 100% implant should be always covered with the bone. That is what the requirement.
Correct.
But sir, in case of sinus lift surgeries, when you do a sinus lift and when you do a bone graft, it's not, never you will find a 100% BIC ratio. Still your implant survive for 20 years, 30 years after sinus lift procedures. This is all studies which is going on. 50% is mandatory for sinus lift implants, sinus lift surgeries.
Listen, what I want to say, I want to add in the answer what Shenoy sir has told. What we usually do whenever we have such type of ailing implants, like where there is loss of the bone, say crystal loss of the bone, we do a treatment what we call it as the acid etching of the implant, and that is done by using the 33% phosphoric acid which we are using for doing the acid etching at the time of doing the composite restorations. Okay, so that is what we call it as the exact name of the procedure is I'm not remembering at the moment. So what we have to acid etch that particular surface, because what the acid does, it enters inside the pores of the exposed surface of that particular implant. Okay, and whatever the microorganisms which are there attached inside, okay, which are present in, because you know the every implant is having a rough surface which is either created by what I will say the additive method or subtractive method. Okay, so we have to first clean that particular implant, and the cleansing of that implant is done by phosphoric acid. The acid reaches inside the pores. It will, whatever the contaminated area is there, and that surface will be treated with the help of that acid, and then you can graft that area. Okay, so the ailing implant can be converted into, a failing implant can be converted into an ailing implant.
Right.
So that is the exact philosophy behind ailing and failing implants.
Abhay,
so yeah.
What I wanted to know is that, we have these pterygoid implants, which are smooth surface implants.
Right, sir.
Isn't it? So would we see such a problem in these patients?
So smooth surface means like zygoma and all you're talking about?
Yes. Zygoma, pterygoid.
Usually you don't have, but if the depth of the gingival cuff around the implant is more, then the possibility of maintaining that particular peri-implant health is a problem, sir.
Okay.
Because when it is a polished surface, you don't have any problem, but the maintenance of that particular depth around the implant will be a big issue for the patient.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that is that is one of the reasons I had attended. I was the moderator for a conventional versus pterygoid implant, and this is the reason they say that normally you will not find a smooth surface implant fail usually, whereas a coated implant or the conventional implant would have such problems.
So if you see, sir, around 15-20 years back, when you did an implant in your mouth, you have a better experience. So that implant was having a smooth, polished collar around that. That is a Frealet implant. Okay.
Yes.
It's the same thing what you're talking now.
Yeah.
Now the people are moving to that particular concept where the polished collar, probably after 5-10 years, that will be but we'll come back to that particular technology only.
Okay. While there was one question which maybe you can, I'll just tell you. That was a question from Rahul Chaudhary, and he was asking what is the preferred safe approach for sinus lift. Why I'm asking you, Abhay, is that I think Vipin has lost his connection. So if you can answer, or somebody, I mean, you
I'm
can.
here.
give some. Vipin is back. Okay.
Yeah.
So Vipin, the question was that what is the preferred method for a safe sinus lift?
So basically, there are two types of sinus lifts. One is indirect sinus lift, and another is a direct sinus lift. If you have a residual alveolar bone height more than 4 mm, you can go for directly indirect sinus lift.
Okay.
But if you have a less than 4 mm of height, you can go for a direct sinus lift.
Okay.
You got my point?
Yes.
Less than 4 mm, direct sinus lift. More than 4 mm, you can go for indirect sinus lift.
Right. So
Along with the bone graft.
Along with the bone graft, correct. Actually, Vipin,
Yeah.
a few years back, there was something called the hybrid implant which had come. It was propagated from the south. And the technique is, we are MaxFax, so we do a lot of plating in the anterior wall of maxilla, the buttress and all, where we don't care where the screw goes. So obviously, some screws would obviously go into the sinus, right? So the design was that it was kind of a vertical one, which will come across the height of the maxilla, and then it will take a curve, and it's got an abutment on it already, right? So that is how you played. But then unfortunately, it fell out of favor. It was called as a hybrid implant, and that was promoted about 5-6 years back in a reasonably big way. I think I have one implant with me. I've not put it in any patient. So, we have all such things that happen. So, it's a constantly evolving and a dynamic field, actually. So, one of the most dynamic fields, actually. Everything keeps changing like COVID.
Yes. Yes.
You have this protocol, that protocol, and so on and so forth. Are there any more questions to be asked? Vipin?
We can get for the second session then. Most of the things are remaining, I guess.
I think
prosthetic complication is remaining.
Yeah, so I think Vipin will have one more session.
Yeah, it will be. It will take another 1 hour, I guess.
Okay.
I feel I was slow enough.
No, you were dealing it quite well, but the thing is that it's quite a big one, so we'll have it in 2 parts. We'll inform participants about the next date very soon, because it will have to be in collaboration with so many people. I'm sure we'll have it. Now, I have one small task that I need to do, Vipin.
Yes, sir.
So, allow me to share. This is a small certificate, Vipin. Small in the sense it looks small, but this is a small token of our.
Thanks a lot, sir.
And unfortunately, since Sanjay could not be here, so maybe we'll send a certificate. Or do I get a certificate? फिर मैं बोलूँगा ये तोहफा हमने खुद को कबूल.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, audience. Thank you, Vipin. Thank you, everybody, seniors who joined. And we'll have a session soon. Tomorrow, there is a webinar on non-aerosol dentistry by Dr. Santosh Ravindran. That is by registration only. And we have crossed 100, by the way. And on Wednesday, we have Dr. Vrinda speaking on oral submucous fibrosis tips and tricks. So I think please do join. Both the webinars are at 11 o'clock tomorrow and day after. So please do join us. Thank you, Vipin.
Thank you, sir.
And session 2 will be very soon.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir. Go, Corona, go.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. The recorded link will be, the recording will be put as a link on our Facebook page. Okay. And maybe tomorrow or day after, whenever. Okay. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vipin.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Don't go, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let me see if there are any more questions. Okay, prosthetic complications next time lenge. And
regarding maxillary sinus, you were asking something.
Yeah, what is a safe method for doing a maxillary sinus lift? So I think you can still answer. No, Rahul has gone. So maybe we'll deal it the next time.
Yeah, definitely, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Very comprehensively dealt.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye bye.